questions. The first one is kind of what I alluded to with our learning developments, or learning environments. We have a division in my department called Learning and Development. So that's delivering education to our student athletes, talking to our coaches, helping everybody design what's the best overall environment. So when we come into our position meeting rooms here in just a little bit before practice today, what does that environment look like right now? Right when the kids come in, what does it look like? Is there juice? Is there energy? Is there interaction between our coaches and the players, our GAs, our analysts? Okay, when we come out onto the field, what does that learning environment look like? This field out here is a massive learning environment. So how can we maximize this, the setup of our drills, the placement of our coaches, wherever it is, instructing our athletes to best impact the development of our guys? The second area is called performance management. That's where Dan alluded a minute ago, where we work in our department with Coach Franklin, his staff, many of our other staffs here at Penn State on practice design. So thinking about what is the best strategy over time to build across a week. You know, if game day's Saturday, what should Friday look like? What should Thursday look like? What should game day minus 3, 4 look like for us? Okay, and then within the practice shell, you know, what should pre-practice look like? On any given day, how should we kind of waive or vary the intensity of our periods over time? We talk about that within our performance management area. And then the technology piece, we're very fortunate we have a lot of tech here. If you guys are sticking around for practice, our shop and setup will be right over on the sideline, so you kind of see some of that. So if you're interested in that, I can show you there. But basically we track everything. But it doesn't have to be technology. It can simply be flipboard, measuring frequency of how many times things happen. It could be a stopwatch, how long practice was. It could be a survey asking a kid or a coach, how hard do you think today was? But these are our different areas within our department and kind of what we focus on. Okay, I've mentioned these 3 different areas. Now, are there any questions that maybe sparks practice design, organization of the learning environment? Yes, sir.
If you wouldn't mind, what would be quickly like what you would think for a high school Monday through Friday practice?
Yeah, I think largely it depends on your philosophy. I'm going to start with a word we call the game model. So the game model is a very umbrella term for what your mentality, what your philosophy is. The game model is informed by a lot of things. Obviously, you and your staff's philosophy about the tactics. You know, are you a spread out team? Are you a little bit more traditional? It could be your personnel. What kind of personnel do you have from a physical standpoint? Are you big? Are you small? Do you have a lot of substitutions? Do you have a lot of depth? It could be influenced by the geography of where you are. So like here at Penn State, we're a blue collar program. We're in the steel region of Pennsylvania. So we're gonna be blue collar, that's part of us, that's our game model. So a lot of those things will influence your decision, but ultimately it would be your decision there. So a couple different things, what you'd see, and if I can, I'm gonna do it with Saturday game, just because I'll be a little bit more fluid with thinking about the days. If I was gonna play on Saturday, there's a couple different options that you could have, and I typically try to work backwards, okay? Whether you could call it a game, whether you call it a goal, whether you call it money, whatever it is, find the end point and then work backwards. And I typically will label my days game day minus 1, game day minus 2, game day minus 3, all the way back, okay? And I only do that to like game day minus 4. And then what I'll call like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday is game day plus 1, game day plus 2. So you may hear me refer to that. But if I have a game on Saturday, there's a couple different options. One, a little bit maybe more traditional, would be game day minus 1 that Friday. I could have a small walkthrough. I could have everything kind of slowing down. I could have a very high mental day, okay? Thursday, maybe that could be a day that maybe I use uppers. I could go full go, whatever that may be, but I would have a specific thing there. Maybe it's a little bit ramped down. Wednesday, and a more traditional model, you guys speak a little bit more fluently about this than me, maybe a big work day for you. Tuesday could potentially be a work day, okay? And then Monday could be potentially an off day, okay? So another model could potentially, to your question, maybe you could flip your walkthrough day and your Thursday. So maybe instead of having your big mental day, your non-physical day on Friday, you could potentially flip that and put that on Friday or the day leading up to your game day -1. Now, there's a couple things from what we learned in science that can be good for us. Okay, so when we start to have, let's say, on a Saturday game model, Tuesday, Wednesday as work days, and then Thursday work day, and then Friday really, really low, then just to jump back up on Saturday, sometimes what we'll see is actually some of our athletes may not be firing really fast in terms of our central nervous system. Our central nervous system is the internal component of our body that helps us explode, be violent, be fast, and to actually move really rapidly. So sometimes what you'll see is on Friday or the day before the game, if you don't do a lot, it's a little bit lethargic on Saturday getting started. It takes you a little bit longer. So the theory behind it, popularized by a couple other teams several years ago, was just taking your game day -1, game day -2, and flipping those. So putting the mental day on game day -2 and putting a light, fast, very detailed practice to essentially ramp you up into Saturday. That could potentially be a model. But what I would encourage you, going back to your game model, remember that game model word that I used is your philosophy about how you play. It's influenced by your personnel, what you believe in as a coaching staff. It's influenced by the geographical region of where you are, okay? Then start to establish goals for each given day, okay? So game day -1, what is my goal? You guys decide. Game day -2, what is my goal? You decide. 3, 4, same kind of thing. And then what you could actually do is start to put from the tactical side, your X's and O's, specific goals. So maybe a certain day is normal downs, a certain day is more red zone. Then start to couple the physical components. On your normal downs day, where you're working a lot open field, tell your guys to go. Maybe that's your speed day. So now you're starting to couple your normal downs with your speed. The next day, if you're working red zone, work a little bit more up front. Maybe have a little bit more contact. So now what we're starting to do is pair the tactical, the X's and O's, with the physical component. Then over the course of a week, you start to see like a little wave, and your athletes it'll help your athletes stay a little bit fresher. But kind of back to your question, Coach, I think largely it depends on what you guys believe in, but start with the game, Friday, Saturday, work backwards, and have goals for each day. Yes, sir. Anything else within these 3 areas? We talked practice design, learning developments, coaching, teaching, best practices, infusing different types of technology or information data. And it doesn't even have to be fancy tech. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Josh, you may have said this, and I walked up a little bit late, but when you talk about, like we all did forever, right, the day before the game being a walkthrough, did you talk about in terms of how the body responds to that, what the body thinks about going into recovery mode?
Great point. Yes, sir. So a little bit more about, I alluded to sometimes we could be lethargic if we take too much time off, or maybe a Friday, if given that we're playing Saturday, if we take Friday as more of a mental walkthrough day. I mentioned that maybe sometimes we could be lethargic. The reason that happens is we have 2 different sides of our central nervous system. Okay, we have the sympathetic side, and I want you to think about gas pedal. It's ramp, all systems go. Imagine if somebody was to come up behind me and smack their hands, I'm either gonna punch them in the face or I'm gonna run. It's that fight or flight. The other side of the CNS is called parasympathetic. That's like brake pedal. Okay, when you go home at night and relax, calm down, you go into rest, digestion, everything's kind of relaxing, getting back ready for tomorrow. When you take a day off on Friday, it does push you a little bit more parasympathetic, and it takes a little bit of time to get you out of that. So we try to encourage our guys, and actually we speak this language to our guys a lot, one-on-one in a team setting. During practice or before practice, we want to engage the sympathetic side of that nervous system. So because of that, they come in and they do activity with our strength staff. They start to prime. In our lab, we have blue lights, which is trying to wake these guys up. We want to engage that sympathetic side. Conversely, after practice, we want to slow everything back down. So now if you zoom out from that concept and put it in a week, if Thursday is sympathetic high and Friday is parasympathetic low, it potentially could take you a little bit more time to find an inflection point and start to get fast on game day. That's a little bit about that philosophy. Does that answer the question, Coach?
Yeah, and the other thing I think that made sense to me that you talked about is almost all the other sports, the Olympic sports, have been doing that forever. For football, we've had this approach. Like you look at wrestlers, like the morning of a meet, they're going hard as hell to get their nervous system ready to go.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And the key about it is, like Coach mentioned, they're turning their nervous system on. They're not doing a lot, but they're doing it really, really intense. And that's starting to cause things to fire. So one of the key rules is to do things light and fast or with full intent. It could be things such as like short sprints. I'm just talking like 5-yard sprints, med ball throws. It could be med ball chest passes. It could be yells. It could be hops. It could be pogo hops, catching a ball. Anything like that to get things firing. That could be like your game day primer. Other sports, like Coach mentioned, track and field does this, where the day before a meet, they start to just kind of work on some starts, get things firing, coming out of that hole, that parasympathetic side.
Can I say one more thing, then I'll shut up?
Yes, sir.
Could you talk to them about, because when you said this to me, it made a lot of sense. Especially young players, high school, young college players, they get the butterflies. And how you interpret that. Is it nerves, or is it how you talk to our guys about and making sure that they recognize really what their body is doing, and it's not nerves? Could you talk about that? I think that's a good one.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I think sometimes what Coach was talking about is, especially some of our young guys, when they go in front of 107,000 at night for the very first time, they start to feel some type of way. Maybe it's the butterflies in your belly, which we've all had. Maybe it's just a little bit of anxiety. But sometimes embracing that and having using that feeling to kind of catapult yourself into the next maybe competition, the game, is actually a good thing. It could actually be a little bit of the sympathetic side of the nervous system, where my body's actually interpreting it almost like a threat, not in a bad way, but it's like, hey, you know what? I'm about to step in the arena. So my body's starting to ramp up. So what we'll do is to talk about to our guys about just embracing that. If you feel that, that's fine. Find and use that as an energy to catapult you through that game. But to Coach's question, that's certainly something that we talk about, and we use more of an interdisciplinary model too. So it's just not me talking about it. Every one of our subunits is talking about it as well. Yes, sir.
So is that more, I would say, mental, kind of a mental side of that you kind of like doing game day? Do you talk about it, doing like before pregame and stuff like that, or does that go into some of the exercises and everything that you do pregame?
Yeah. So the question was, is that pregame or is that through the week? Okay. Yes, sir. So a little bit of both. Now, one thing that I think a big thing for me is I'm a big nerd. I wouldn't say I'm a true like scientist like some of the amazing people we have across campus, but I do want some information. I always want to be digging. But one thing I am very sensitive of with some of our data collection and some of our practices is we don't want to interfere the guys too close to competition. So because of that, we are wary with what we do, but we do infuse it in every single thing that we do. From our testing with some of our tech, from our positive self-talk, from me just, guys will probably tell you, I say start fast probably 100 times a week, but we infuse that across the entire week. So I guess to answer your question, it is a little bit on game day, but it's every single day we're just trying to talk about not just one thing, but just infusing a lot of this throughout the week. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, kind of going back to what I had mentioned here, we want to use what's called a minimum effective dose. Okay, that's coming from like healthcare, where, if I have an illness, the doc is not going to give me all the medicine. He's going to give me just a little bit of medicine, see if it fixes. If it doesn't, he's going to give me a little bit more. Now I'm better, and now he stops. We want to do that. We want to take almost like a minimum effective dose approach. So for us, like on game day, it really depends on time of game. We play at a couple different time slots. Here, if we're on East Coast time, we can play earlier in the day. We can play at 3:30. We can play at 7. You can play even a little bit later if you're on ESPN, ABC. Okay, we could go to the Central Time Zone where we're going to actually play at 11 a.m. local in the Central Time Zone. A little bit more common, the more west you go, you could have that early slot. So for us, it depends largely on that. Early in the morning, typically a day for us, and again, you don't have to get super fancy with this at all, but when our guys come down for breakfast, Jevin and Joe from the sport technology side, they're going to have some music on. Right away, we're down there talking to the guys, improving mood. What we found in some of the literature is if you increase mood, the rating of perceived exertion, or the way the guys feel, the difficulty of practice is actually lower. So increase mood, they think it's easier. So that's kind of what we're going to do, increase mood immediately. So have some cool music on, talk a little shop to them, talk a little crap to them, get them laughing, working, and just kind of talking. And then at that point, and if you guys came through the facility, you've seen them, but we use blue light therapy lights. We have blue lights all around our breakfast hall. Okay, so when they come in, blue lights are surrounding there. Blue lights emulate what sunlight does, where sunlight comes into the optic nerve. It helps shunt the secretion of melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone that makes me drowsy. You guys have probably seen like over-the-counter melatonin, but blue light stops that. Studies have shown if you can get around a blue light box for about 15 minutes, it'll lock your circadian rhythm for the day. So especially for an 11 a.m. game, we get them around blue lights to help wake them up immediately. And then, you know, not to steal Coach's thunder, but he gets a little hands-on. You know, he's hugs, handshakes, being aggressive with them, positive self-talk immediately. Okay, you go team meal, we get to the stadium, our strength staff, fantastic group. They've got different types of primers for the guys on the field. They've got some different things we call supple line in the locker room for them to do in terms of soft tissue. But we got just like little things, and it's very much an opt-in model. We let the guys pick. We educate them on a lot of things, and they kind of get to pick, take ownership of that. But they can do different things like mid-ball slams. They could do some small hops. They could work with different guys in terms of just general mobility. But there's things on the field and off the field, and that takes you about to your actual team warm-up. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You were talking about like young bucks. So what you talked about, I know you relate to younger kids, even below high school. If you have recommendations for like, you know, kids at that age, you know, like one kid, you know, every game day there's two, if not one kid growing up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And just before the week, like our team has 11, 12 players. So they're playing both ways. And that's hard for the little kid. If you have recommendations, like coaches, for high school.
Yeah, no. To that point, I'm going to just click a couple slides ahead here. This right here may answer some of your questions. Now, I can't answer the depth question that you had said that you don't have a lot of kids on the roster. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. One thing to look in, his question was maybe, you know, we're talking about high school, we're talking about college ball players, you know, how can maybe we do some things to influence some of the younger athletes? One thing I would propose is an idea called long-term athlete development. This is what I had on the slide deck in case we didn't have any questions today. But basically, LTAD is basically defining success. So in your area, for us at maybe the high level, NFL, college, big high school, you're thinking more outcome related things, like I gotta win, okay? But with your developmental kids, you're thinking about the process, teaching them the process, getting them involved in a lot of things. And this whole idea here of long-term athlete development, it's kind of a foreign model. Came out of Canada from a guy named Esteban Bollier. But basically it takes a kid from 0 all the way to later on in his life. See, what you're talking about is like kids in maybe 11, 12, okay? So when you think about kids in 11, 12, basically what you're trying to do is to build overall physical literacy, make sure they're moving, making sure they're enjoying movement, making sure they're motivated to do it, and understanding a little bit about that. But within this age group right here, even like, it's kind of like right in the middle, you're trying to teach them how to learn to train, because a lot of times when they come up here, they start to learn, you know, phys ed's kind of cool early on, but then training is a little bit more directional, and sometimes it turns some kids off. So get them to learn how to train, teach them just the general sport skills. You know, if you can get them to play a lot of different positions at that age, which you probably already are, you know, because of the depth, get them to play both sides of the ball, get them to play in space, get them to play hand in the dirt, get them to do a lot of different things to learn the sport skills. As they come a little bit older, maybe 12 to 16, maybe you're getting a little bit more specific. You're talking a little bit more about the different physical qualities. Maybe you're putting them, it doesn't have to be like extreme, like heavyweight or anything, but maybe you're getting them in a little bit more robust physical training program where you could develop just like general physical prep, call that like aerobic base. Not like miles and miles and miles, but just get them active, just get them running. You know, there's different windows of trainability, and I don't have the slide up here, but around 10 to 12, especially with the male group, if you can get them sprinting, there's a massive window there for speed development. So if you can get them sprinting early and often there, you can actually see later in their life that there can be a little bit more, be faster, because they've developed that earlier on. But getting them involved, essentially at that age, teach them how to love to train and continue to love physical activity right here. What other questions? Practice planning, design, logistics, using information to help maybe make decisions. Yes, sir. Yep. The question was, throughout the season, how frequently or how often do we feel like we need to modify practice? And it really depends, and that's a very big cop-out answer. I hate when people do this, okay? But it really depends on the situation. And that's why we collect information, because we don't just want to make subjective decisions are good at times, but we don't want to just rely on that. So we collect information nonstop. It starts with time on feet and a subjective rating of how the athletes felt the day. So that's going to inform what we're doing. So if we normally practice, just for math's sake, 100 minutes, that's incorrect, but I'm not good at math. Let's say we practice 100 minutes, or whether it's 200 minutes, 150 minutes. And then over time, you start to see the athletes are reporting practice to be even harder and harder and harder over time. Maybe you cut back the overall minutes. Basically, what you're trying to do when you make decisions like that is have a volume metric. That's what I'm alluding to with the time on feet, and then an intensity metric, how hard the athletes felt. Now, if you have maybe a little bit more specific types of tech, you could go even deeper. So for example, what we'll use to make that even more specific is we use a device called a catapult GPS unit. Sits right behind the shoulder blades here, tells us overall distance, speed. So now when we start to see maybe some regression in some of that information, we could potentially cut back. We also use force plate information. Force plate, think about it just like a Cadillac scale. Okay, so like a scale, I stand on the scale, it tells me my body weight. A force plate samples at about 1,000 times per second, and it's going to allow us to see a little bit more changes in fatigue. So I think what you're looking for is just look at the changes in your athletes. If they're operating at a nominal level, there's no reason to change. If they start to regress, maybe you pull back. To an earlier question, have specific goals for each day. You know, I think if we do the same thing every single day, you can run into what's called training monotony, and that can actually lead to some stress. So if you keep some variety in your practice week and your overall practice month structure, that can help keep you fresh. Other questions? Practice design, logistics, anything like that? All right, let's keep looking at this real quick. So when we think about LTAD, and please throw up a question, throw up a hand anytime. When we think about LTAD, oftentimes it looks like it's for just your K-12 population, your young guys coming up all the way. But honestly, you can take this and infuse it from every level, from Pee Wee all the way to the NFL. And actually what you'll see is you can do it later on in life. What we want early on, where the arrow is up there, is we want to develop great movers. I got a 3-year-old at the house. As frustrating as it is, I want him jumping off the coffee table, provided mom's not at the house. I want him running around, dunking the basketball. It doesn't matter if it's soccer ball, baseball, whatever. I'm okay if something hits the wall and breaks. I want him moving, and I want to continue to motivate him to do that because he's going to repeat it and do it again. That's that early stage. What we want to do at our stage in high school, in college, in the NFL, is we actually want our guys to continue to get specific on learning how to train, training to win, and then doing that over and over and over. Okay, so during this stage specifically, kind of alluded to it here a second ago, we need to teach our guys how to train. And I think largely that is just speaking about it, talking about it. Frequency at this point is a really big deal. So creating an atmosphere of training so that they can enjoy it, creating an atmosphere where they're involved in a robust training program. You know, a robust training program does not have to be overly complicated. All you need each week, at minimum one time, is a squat pattern, okay? It doesn't matter if it's a barbell on my back, holding a mitt ball, a hinge pattern. It could be a good morning, an RDL. So now you got your lower body taken care of. It's got to be a push. It could be a push-up, a bench, overhead, whatever it is, a pull, and then a bunch of carries. Absorbing force. It could be bracing. You put those things together and strand it over a kid's career, now they're part of a really neat program, and they're learning how to train. Now, when we think about training to compete, now you got to start to up the ante a little bit. Now you're getting a little bit more specific, more targeted with what you're doing. Okay, so maybe you're holding them more accountable too. I have benchmarks, and we talk openly about reaching benchmarks. And if it doesn't reach the benchmark, having conversations with the kid, having conversations with your staff about maybe why we weren't reaching those. And then what we're at right now, let's say here at Penn State, and we talk about this quite openly, we at this stage need to win, okay? Earlier I kind of skipped over a slide really quickly, but talked about 2 different types of goals. It can be either the outcome, I have an outcome goal, or a process goal. Way down here, we're talking a lot about process. But now, once we get to this stage up here, we're talking process, and now we're talking about winning. Winning potentially is not talked about enough. We need to be successful. And then to the question a second ago, when do we start to pull back a little bit? So we start to look at some of our guys, maybe some of the veteran athletes that have a little extra mileage on them. If they do start to get to their 4th, 5th, 6th year and they start to see some mileage, we remove volume a little bit, but now their stress is coming from they're expected to win more times than not. It could be in a specific drill in the off season. It could be in a one-on-one pass route down here in the corner in our red zone one-on-ones. You should win more times than not in training at this stage, okay? Any questions on this? When we're thinking about developing our athletes, this is the model that we use. It comes from a lot of different areas. I got some sources on the back for you guys too to check out. But basically, when we're talking about holistically developing our guys, this is the model we use. First, development of an athlete is 100% opt-in, okay? Especially when they reach the age of accountability, where it's becoming training to train and learning how to train. They have to want to do it. That's why you see that light blue perimeter around the pyramid up here. It's called a championship mindset. Dr. Olson, Carl Olson, our sports psychologist here at Penn State, created this. And basically, the opt-in model is if the athlete doesn't want to do it, once they reach these stages up here, they're not going to do it. So us as coaches, we got to encourage athletes to want to be a part of it, want to meet us in the middle. Because if not, it's going to be really challenging to go to the upper tiers. After that, we focus largely on health and wellness, okay? It's not sexy, it's not really pretty, okay? But it's simple, it's the low-hanging fruit. If I have really poor health or wellness, overall lifestyle, I can't train the other components very well, okay? So in this area, What we're going to try to do weekly is talk about hygiene, talk about habits, choice. We're going to talk about sleep. We're going to talk about eating. All these things compound and allow us to have a big, robust foundation. That's why it's at the bottom. Think about like a big pyramid in the world. Okay, the bottom is really wide. It's massive, and the wider the base, the higher we can go up top. Okay. In this area, I would be remiss if I did not say that sleep is the most impactful investment that our athletes can have. Okay, it costs zero other than a choice, and it has massive returns. Generally speaking, 7.5 to 9 hours will help you be in a good position each day at this younger level. But that is something that we're going to talk about every day. That is something that every college kid and probably every high school kid has trouble with. When we get to this middle section here, these are what we call the trainable aspects. And when you're developing the complete kid, you know, I spent about 10 years as a strength coach in college level. It's really easy, you know, for me to become really biased in this area because that's what I like. That's my lens. That's what I like to do. All my buddies are strength coaches, and I really like to jam with those guys. So it's really easy for me to speak a lot about this. But that's not the only part of training. Okay, we have the physical, obviously the weight room, we need to develop a big engine. Okay, we have the technical and tactical, that's like on field. Technical is developing your skills pertaining to a position. Okay, tactics are the X's and O's, the scheme. We have to develop those in unison. And then the mental piece is essentially developing, you know, when I have a great day, I gotta clear it, wake up tomorrow and do the same thing, repeat it. But if I have a poor day, or a busted coverage, a bad play, a dropped ball, I got to clear that and be able to line back up as well. So all these things should be operating and being trained at the same time. And what we're trying to chase is what's called high performance. Performance is essentially executing a task. When you attach high performance to it, it's consistently doing my job. Going back to what we said in that last slide, holding people accountable to win. I got to be accountable for doing my job. Questions on this? Yes, sir.
Let's say a kid commits to Penn State as a sophomore or junior in high school, and do you get any involvement in providing development training programs for that kid for 1 to 2 years before they come to Penn State? Are you allowed to do that? And also, like from a weightlifting and recruiting or development standpoint, when they get involved, putting together programs that they can develop over 1 to 2 years.
Yeah. So the question was, and Dan, I'm going to lean on you for the timeline when this can happen. The question was, once a kid commits to Penn State, do they get a program and information from our staff across a couple different spectrums, from the physical side to the off the field side? There is a time that we can do that. I think it's when they commit. When they sign, we can then give them physical preparation programs. But our staff is fantastic in staying in touch with them at all times throughout the entire process. Any other questions? We can keep rolling. 7 minutes, awesome. A couple of other things. If you guys want more about that, take a picture of this really quick. It'll take you to some cool little videos about LTAD. All right, and I can get that to everybody after if you missed that. Let's keep going just really quick. When we think about planning, I do want to offer a couple free things, and I can provide this for everybody if you want it. You know, planning is everything. We've talked about goals. We talked about knowing our philosophy, doing what we need to do. Now we got to have a plan. You know, what we want to do too, and I had mentioned that things work together. We got to keep in mind that our athletes are not machines. You can't take it apart like this duck. You can't pull him apart and put him back together and have it to work the same. Our kids, we just can't pull them apart in a lot of different directions. We need to put everything together and organize our training. I'm gonna skip through some of this really quick. It was just to prove some points. When we plan, okay, the biggest thing is we want to just keep it simple, okay? Keep it super simple. Think about the athlete in the center of what we do. A big thing for us is we want to communicate. So when developing the plan, it could be the head coach developing the plan, but disseminate it to everybody. Let everybody know what the plan is so they can start to grow. That will also help your young staff understand why the head coach is making certain decisions. So when that coach grows up, he's able to then make similar decisions or understand what the rationale was behind it. Evaluation is everything. and then we got to make it about a learning environment. And we'll kind of scroll through here for some examples. This is the most important file on my computer. This is what's called an annual plan. Everybody's got an annual plan, they just all look a little bit different. But this would be like, and there's nothing sensitive on this, so you can take pictures. But basically, this speaks to what I mentioned earlier. Have an end goal in mind. Okay, so if this is fall camp, these are our first games, that is a goal. Now I can work backwards and plan different things. If you're not necessarily a 52-week sideways guy, maybe your plan is more vertical in nature. But basically, when we map out everything, that's our map. That's where we're heading. So now I can start to break things up into blocks. And what our block plan looks like this. Okay, so each one of these little chunks, let's say 8-week block, that'd be like 2 months. Then we can get very specific with each individual day. Just a template, but something that you can think about. We're getting more granular. The big thing, going back to the communication piece, find a way to communicate with your staff. Something that's free that we actually use here too is the Microsoft products. If you work in a school system, most likely you have Microsoft 365, okay? If you don't, you can download these things for free, create a free Microsoft account. You can build your staff within this, free resource, okay? I'll go through here really quick, some different things. Now, when we're thinking about evaluation, super simple. We have a plan, now we want to be able to evaluate it. A couple different ideas from that. Remember, keeping it super simple, an after-action review. Post-practice, come in, sit on the couch for a second, talk to your staff. What went well, what went poorly, what do we need to change or run back tomorrow, okay? You could have some things like an ecological breakdown, okay? So think about the whole thing is like an ecosystem. Our team is an ecosystem with a lot of different working components. So now when we break it down, it doesn't have to be really super extraneous information coming out. Just talk about, did the athletes look ready to play today? Were they prepared for practice? Was my practice plan appropriate for today? What was the weather? What was the turf? What was the situation, the environment like? Put notes in there, that helps guide your conversation. Okay, I already kind of talked about this. This is the very first 2 metrics I put in after practice every night. It's time on feet, and in the weight room, our staff, a bunch of us are in there just asking athletes how the practice went. That's an evaluation process. Okay, and then basically take that information and I'll throw it right back into this big plan. Everything has context to it. I do want to get to this. This is the last thing, Dan, and we'll move on. Okay, we spend a lot of time in these conferences and these clinics talking about athletes, athlete development. That's what we do, and that's why we talk about it. One of the biggest things that we don't talk about though is coach health, and I think there's some really low-hanging fruit in this area. Okay, so from what we learn in education with like teachers, teacher behavior impacts the learning environment, the classroom, then the learning environment changes the way our kids learn. So coaches, if you view yourself as a teacher on the field, the same thing would hold true. If you perform better as a coach, your students, your athletes will have a better environment that they're practicing in, and then they're gonna develop a little bit more. So a couple things here. You gotta be the best you. These are super low-hanging fruit items here. Carry a water bottle, okay? Super simple, costs virtually nothing. Eat food, okay? I grew up around coach, okay? I know sometimes we're not always eating. Sometimes it's a bunch of coffee and we just grind. And it's a badge of honor, it is. But we gotta make sure we're taking care of ourselves, we must eat. When I say move dirt, I mean be active. Okay, so I got this big pile of dirt over here. I need to move it over the course of time. Some days I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna take a big shovel, and I'm gonna get a big shovel and move it. Some days I'm gonna move a wheelbarrow. Some days I'm gonna take a spoon. But every single day I'm gonna do something to take care of myself. It could be a walk, it could be a training session, but take care of you. And then finally, at the end of every day, at the beginning of every day, whenever time's right for you, just think about your day and practice a little gratitude. What am I thankful for? Holy smokes, this is a really cool thing that we got going here. Practice some gratitude. But we must think about ourselves as coaches, as performers, in all these different lenses too. If we are better as coaches, as performers, our kids are going to develop over time better. Okay, I'm out of time. A couple different resources here. I'll make this available. These are really neat books that can inform some different things. Super, super simple, easy read, awesome things to check out. These are free resources. Check out all the Microsoft things. They're super free. They can increase your staff productivity. And I will say again, it is free. And then if you click on this right here, it will take you to our YouTube account. We post a ton of different education up there. This presentation will be up there as well with all the content. But Dan, thank you so much. Everybody, thank you so much.
Thanks, Nelly. Nelly will be around, guys, if you have any questions. Our next speaker is Tony DeMeo.